Hello again, everybody, and welcome to another Inside Lowell podcast. I am your host, Teddy Panos, coming to you from the Well Point Studios here in beautiful, historic downtown Lowell. And today, we're going to offer you a view of another candidate vying for a seat on the Lowell City Council. The newest candidate literally declared her candidacy. Oh, what was it? Not even a week and a half ago.
A week and a couple days, yep.
A week and a couple of days ago. And we're excited to welcome Paulette Renault-Caragianes to the Well Point Studios. How are you, Paulette?
Good, thank you. And you're one of the few people who knows how to pronounce the last part of my last name right? You know, people struggle with that all the time.
If you grow up with
I know.
Caragianes, I was envious about your husband's short last name.
It's so funny. My parents were always sort of like, you know, my mother grew up in Nahat, adjacent to Lynn, went to high school there. So she knew a lot of Greek American folks. So she was sort of like going the whole, like, do I say Cuddy? It's like, you know, I keep thinking like when I met, you know, Chuck's parents, I was thinking like, it's kind of like two girls' names, Kara and Janice. It's like, okay, we're in.
I have to figure out how to do that for my, that's why I shortened it to Panos. They were butchering it in my TV days. Excited to have you here. We're going to talk about your campaign, why you're running, the issues that you're going to be focusing on. Let me just quickly thank our friends at Well Point one more time for hosting us here in the Well Point Studios. Well Point, of course, the only health plan offering healthcare benefits exclusively to Massachusetts GIC members. At Well Point, your whole health is their whole point. Thanks to Well Point. Thank you again, Paulette, for joining us here. And the first question right out of the box. And you are you have run before for office. Yep. But it was a while ago, right?
It was quite some time ago. Yeah, I was in the old citywide days.
2003, if I remember.
Yes, yep.
Okay.
Yep. I would have been seated 2004 had I won. So I know a little bit about campaigning. Chuck also ran and ended up serving after two resignations on the council. So but in this new era of district representation, it's a very different and more both manageable and certainly more attractive opportunity.
Yeah, I bet you'll enjoy knocking doors and meeting neighbors in one neighborhood instead of all of them. But for those who don't know you and aren't aware of you, who are you and why are you running to become the District 2, the Centralville District City Councilor?
So first of all, thank you for the opportunity to be here. It's great to have a venue where people can learn a little bit more about me. So I, in the old parlance of Lowell, I'm a Blowellian. I've only lived here almost 40 years. I grew up mostly in Danvers, Massachusetts. I'm a nurse. I was still a nurse. I worked clinically as a nurse for well over 20 years in maternal child health. I actually, part of my career, I worked at the what is now University Crossing, the old St. Joe's there. I've been in public health. I've been in municipal government. I was the director of Health and Human Services for the city of Lowell. I was one of the people who worked on truly landmark tobacco control regulations that generationally changed the way people think about tobacco use as well as their exposure. I was also the chief public health officer for the city of Somerville. So I oversaw a health department not dissimilar from Lowell's health department, where it was school nurses as well as public health nurses and other public health programs. I worked at Lowell Community Health Center for many years doing a variety of jobs. You know, it warms my heart to see the mobile unit out supplementing what the school-based health centers do, because that was one of my jobs. We took over the school-based health center at Lowell High and then initiated one at the old Rogers and the old Bartlett. I've been a Board of Health member for the city of Lowell. I have been retired now for just about a year. I retired as the Associate Dean for Student Health and Wellness at UMass Lowell, where I oversaw our wellness center. and did as one does in their job, a variety of other things. And I still work a couple days a week during the academic year doing student support work. My husband, Chuck, is retiring. He'll be retired as of 5 o'clock on Monday. An educator that a lot of people know from the city. He had worked at the Lowell Middle City. He was one of the founding teachers there, and he had worked at Lowell High and then went to the Maynard district. I have 3 adult children, one of whom I have a side-by-side duplex. It's the house we moved into. One of my children, my daughter, Jeanette, lives next door to us with my grandson, who is one of the joys of my life. And now I'm, now that I'm retired, I have less restrictions on my time. And, the impetus for me running, which I'm guessing would be your next question, is, I've had an interest. I've been civically engaged for a long time. I currently serve as the chair of the Merrimack Valley Housing Partnership, and you all gave some great coverage to us moving into our forever home, right?
We put the story this past week, but you did it earlier in June, right?
Yes, we did it. We had our annual meeting in May, and I've been so fortunate to help support the life-changing work that the Merrimack Valley Housing Partnership does. I'm on the board at CMAA. I've been on the CTI board. I've been on the Girls Inc. board. So I've worked on campaigns, and I'd been thinking about this and wasn't sure. And what really sort of was the tipping point for me was when the public health nurse budget was cut by 2/3. I cannot believe that went was unattended to. If we had not funded 2/3 of our frontline patrol officers, 2/3 of our frontline firefighters, 2/3 of frontline DPW, any of those departments, that people wouldn't have let that happen, even if there was the promise that perhaps that'll get funded later. And public health nursing might seem to be, for a lot of people, sort of an obscure thing to focus on, but all of us who live, work, and play here are impacted by the strength of our public health, right? It doesn't have to be a direct service opportunity with public health nurses, but when people are attended to, for example, for tuberculosis, right? There's a lot of work that goes into helping support people who have TB, and that keeps the rest of us safe, kind of like vaccinations do. So that was the thing that really pushed me over to say, we have other people on the council or other candidates who will tout their kind of out of municipal government experiences. So it's probably time for someone who not only understands public health, but has worked in public health to be there and maybe dig in a little bit more to those sorts of resources and make sure we have what we need.
It's interesting that you talked about that, and when we wrote the story, you kind of highlighted that as an issue for you. I don't remember anybody with a public health background serving on the council or even running. I know Joanne Keegan toyed with the idea a little bit back in 2023, but now, so not just you, but also Erin Gendron serves on the Board of Health. So we actually have 2 public health people in there. So obviously health is an important part of why you're running and also in your career background, but there's also a little bit in education. And as you mentioned, you've served on a number of boards and been politically active. How do you believe that background has kind of shaped your kind of thought process, and how has it prepared you to serve if you're successful in getting elected?
I think one of the most important things that I think about all the time, quite honestly, is when I worked at Lowell Community Health Center, it was the most formative adult experience of my life because it illuminated for me how much I didn't know, but how much I wanted to and needed to know about not just the city, but and the people who live here, but about a broad variety of things. So I that has really shaped my the continuation of my career. When you really sort of meet people where they are and understand why people might get there. Also, being a chair of a board, how you drive, how you help drive important decision making while understanding the boundaries of your role as a board member. You are there, you have fiduciary responsibilities, for example. But at the end of the day, your biggest responsibility is being responsible to and being responsible for the person that you have hired to carry those things out. And I think that it's very tempting for curious people to maybe get in the weeds a little bit around what the role of the council is. So I think that that's an important bit of experience that I bring to the table. And also, I've lived, worked, and played here, right? I've been employed in the city. I have a home in the city. I love doing things in the city. So I kind of touch a lot of parts of how people live their lives around here. And again, I've worked for I work for the university, one of the biggest employers in the city, with a variety of different job types that all interact with each other. Not a lot of people have those opportunities to really think about how your work impacts mine and how my work impacts yours, back and forth, up and down. So I think that is really a very is a sort of a unique quality I bring. And, while you and I may disagree about how COVID was handled, right? We might. But also that was an experience. I had, before Julie Chen became my big boss, right? Before she was the boss of me and everyone else at the university, she was the person that was tapped to shepherd our overall efforts. And working with people who I might otherwise not have worked with, whom I may not have always agreed with, and, kind of being able to move from small to big picture every 5 minutes, and, how do we react to what's going on, but also how do we plan thoughtfully? That's I think a big difference between me and a lot of other people who might be coming on the council, which isn't a pejorative thing, but it's something that I can add to the mix.
All right. What do you see as the most important issues currently facing District 2, the Centralville district?
Living on the north side of the river, I don't want to say the other side of the river because that just changes the perspective, right? I know people who I've barely met, who are thinking about moving to Lowell, even before they know where I live in Lowell. They said, I've been told to stay away from, Pawtuckaville and Centralville because of the traffic, right? It's a real thing. It changes what the house prices are in our part of the city, which is plus and minus, right? It also may change people's perception about siting a business there. So I think that it's important for us to think about the reality and the perception of how Bridge Street traffic, particularly but not exclusively, impacts the economic and personal development of people in that neighborhood. When I work, I don't go down Bridge Street because where I work is in University Crossing. It is a little less than 2 miles from my house. It can take me 40 minutes, depending on when I leave in the morning, to get there. That would be a decision point for a lot of people. So I think that looking at economic development broadly, knowing that people who are driving down from Dracut and New Hampshire who are on Bridge Street, who might see a business that kind of perks their interest, will say, I'm not going to sit in this traffic. I can remember when our kids went to Lowell High. We would never cross the bridge. We would meet them at the Dunkin' Donuts and pick them up, right? So I think that some of looking at how we manage the traffic flow, it's not an easy fix, because if it was, it would be fixed. But I think we need to be more creative about that, particularly with the link coming online. I also think that, how city services are delivered, trash management, road maintenance, how we manage the decreasing green space we have, and also how we think about how we appropriately share the responsibility that we have around increasing housing, all kinds of housing, so that it doesn't disproportionately impact areas that are already dense. around issues with parking. People are, people don't have, no one has one car anymore, right? No one uses the city buses in the manner that we would all like them to, including myself. So thinking about how we manage density, which isn't a bad thing in and of itself, but it can't always fall on neighborhoods like Centralville.
So interesting, a lot of good information in there, and a lot of issues specific to the district, also that you could probably take throughout the city. Yep. So let's get into those a little bit. You mentioned traffic. You're also one of the few candidates to mention traffic. Usually when we hear about traffic, it's a traffic calming measure. Let's get some speed bumps here, there, this street, that street. But in terms of easing the flow of traffic, how does that happen in a city that's growing, that's going to develop more housing, whether it's as much as people want or less, but either way, it's going to grow. As you mentioned, people aren't driving less. They may be driving even more now than they were prior to COVID. So what are some ways that you could possibly think that what could be done better to alleviate some of the issues, especially Bridge Street and that bridge heading across the VFW highway?
So I think, I look at Bridge Street, and if you're out in the morning, particularly, all the kids that are walking downtown to the high school, there's a fair amount of pedestrian traffic too. And pedestrian safety always should be seen as one of the elements when you're thinking about traffic, whether it's traffic calming or whatever. I have never heard anyone talk about looking at alternative traffic patterns inbound and outbound, right? You're still going to have a pinch point, right? I would love to see us really have experts, because that's the other thing, again, having worked for municipalities. I'm not an expert. I'm not a traffic engineer, right? But we have people who do that kind of work, both locally and, the regional planning folks. But can we think about whether we have an additional lane of traffic going inbound, right? When you're at the corner where the CVS is, there are 2 lanes that go left and then 2 lanes that go straight, right? Can we have a 3rd lane?
I've wondered that exact same thing.
But right. And when we changed the traffic pattern on Merrimack Street and Market Street, people's hair was on fire. Like, people are never going to get at. Well, it didn't take long for that to become routinized, right? So again, I'm not saying like that's all you got to do is do that, but has anyone looked at that? And how would you handle that pinch point when you get to Father Morissette? Let's look at that. And similarly, can you do that, because we have a variety of starting times for our school, what time do you start? If it was easy, it would be fixed, but I've never heard anyone talk about that, right? So how do we start talking about that? How do we increase pedestrian safety? How do we persuade people who live in my neighborhood to walk across the bridge and maybe, catch the bus down to the Gallagher terminal if they're taking the train or things like that? Walking over that bridge is really cool, right? It's beautiful. You walk across the river. It's kind of majestic. How do we make that appealing for people and help them think about their route to work differently than they might otherwise? Is there a way to think about, if we have people who live in Drayton and New Hampshire who work in Lowell, in downtown Lowell, which is a whole nother thing, right? Can we persuade, is there a satellite parking lot so people can kind of walk across the river and then, get to their working place? So it's time to start thinking about that, because it's not going to get any less.
Right. Okay. You mentioned housing. You need to take a look at the way we do housing. Somebody who follows politics pretty closely told me that voting down the Lowell Forward plan because of the housing components of it was the final straw, the straw that broke the camel's back and had you enter the race. It sounds like it was actually the budget from what you said.
Yeah.
But since that was kind of one of the recent hot button issues, that was, I think it was a 6-5 vote.
Yep, it was.
And it caught a lot of people by surprise that it went down to defeat.
Yeah.
How do you view the vote on that? How would you have voted if you were on the council?
I am not only reluctant, but I won't say I would have done this, because I know counselors are privy to more information than Joe or Jane Public, right? But when the previous council looked at ADUs, right, and said no, it was going to happen anyway, right? Why not look at these things in a way of sort of like, what do we need to embrace, and where do we need to draw the line? So we, with the Link project being, I know, President Meehan has said it, and Congresswoman Trahan has said it, but I think I might have said it before them in a quiet moment. This is going to revolutionize Lowell in the way the Mills did, right? It's going to change things. There are going to be people who come to work here who work for Draper Labs or, Mass General Brigham or whatever it's called today, the sports, all of those things, who will say, no, I'm not going to live in Lowell, right? I'm going to live in Westford. I'm going to live in 𝐏𝐚𝐮𝐥𝐿, I'm going to live in Drake. But there are people who we can attract to live here, right? They're not all going to live in that beautifully, planned. We have, entry-level housing in those. People are going to want to live in different parts of the city. What kind of housing are we going to be able to offer them? And with the inevitable change that's going to make for people who are just barely hanging on. I don't know about you, but I never in my wildest dreams thought an apartment in Lowell would go for $2,000 a month. And I don't mean like, why would someone pay that much to live in Lowell? I just can't believe that that's how much it costs to live in Lowell.
And that would be considered the affordable.
That would be
right?
Exactly right. So, how do we create housing that really lets people who want to live here stay here, and understand that, zoning and density and those sorts of things, the way we looked at it 5 years ago is not the way we're going to look at it in the future. So really understanding that it's a different environment that we're living in.
You kind of took me to my follow-up question on that. No, thank you. I should say you're doing my work for me. So what are some measures that you think the city can undertake to deal with the fact that more housing is needed and even more will be needed once the development from Link happens and Front Runner City and Lord knows what else is coming down the way?
Right.
But at the same time, not upset. There's a lot of folks in neighborhoods who talk about, the sanctity of single family housing. And they say, they think single family housing is under attack. Your district, the Centralville district, has, I think, a lot more multifamily housing, but I'd be willing to bet there's some areas up there, especially on the Hill, that are zoned single family. So how do you meet both needs? How do you create more housing in an already kind of crowded neighborhood, Centralville, both up on the Hill and down below, versus protecting the single family homeowners? Yeah,
I grew up in a single family home, and my father grew up in Somerville, where it was always multifamilies, right? That was a goal, and I understand that being a goal for people. Like, I want a single family home that's got a yard, a driveway, and I understand that people who have built their future planning goals on that would find that to be earth-shaking. Life has changed. There will always likely be single-family areas. There's codes that will prevent people from using the ADU opportunities because of the size of their lot and those sorts of things. So I think there's some naturalness of having some single family neighborhoods stay as they are. But it's not, life changes. We have to embrace that. If someone really is looking for that kind of life, we all have to make decisions about where we want. If we're lucky enough, we make decisions about where we want to live. So I think to place the burden of density, which I worked for the city of Somerville for 7 years, the densest neighborhoods outside of New York City in the Northeast. No one's complaining about that, right? And there are single family areas in in Somerville. So to have a mix is something that will likely continue. But for neighborhoods like mine, neighborhoods like Back Central, neighborhoods like the Acre, to be the ones who have to put up with the fact that all of the density is being placed there just isn't right. And it also makes those places less desirable. So what you end up with people living there because they have no place else to go. And how does, like, when you feel like you don't have any options, you don't feel a sense of pride and connection to where you live. You feel like, I can't wait to not live here.
So when I remember when we first made the switch to district representation, I remember one of the questions I asked all of the candidates running in 2021 was, how are you going to approach a vote where you're a district councilor, but it's a vote that's going to, that you have to also, besides represent your district, you also kind of have to represent the city of Lowell. And
you
I think the ADU vote was one of those where what was good for one district may not have been for another. And then the other night, a similar vote played out, the Markley vote, where they wanted to put some generators in there. So, and I thought, I told Councilor Scott, she made the vote that I thought she should have made as a district counselor. And I think those who made the other vote did it for, had some backing. How are you going to approach that battle? Are you Centralville's representative, or are you District 2's representative? Or are you Lowell's representative when you're making votes like that and others that affect the entire city?
So that's probably the bread and butter of what a city councilor does, right? Is you're there to make sure the interests of your district are represented and not ignored. You can't build a little fiefdom of your district. We all rise and fall with each other in our neighborhoods. So I would hope that as a city councilor, again, city councilors and those who are just incredibly fastidious about going through all the information, you have a level of information that other people don't have, right? People make hard decisions all the time. People make those decisions within their families, about their budget, about many things. So I would make sure, I would be unlikely to take a vote that would be incredibly detrimental to District 2. If, however, there was a vote where District 2 maybe didn't come out on the most advantageous side, but the impact of a vote largely on the city that would end up benefiting District 2, maybe a little bit down the road, even if it was an unpopular vote, it wouldn't be an easy vote to take. But it'd be one that that would be my consideration. As long as District 2 wasn't getting screwed, right? I would hope that I would have enough information to make a decision that would benefit the constituents of District 2 as well as the rest of the city. Because your most of your votes impact the whole city.
All right. The other night at the council meeting, we officially saw the number for the Lowell High School cost overrun, $40 million. Some folks have told me they're optimistic we can trim it down a little bit, the contingency and some other things, putting the screws to the project manager, the contractors, etc. How should the city deal with this overrun, whatever that final number is? Should they just grin and bear the tax increase? Should they go after the designers and the project managers and construction companies? What should we throw ourselves at the mercy of the state? How will the councilor Paulette Renault-Caragianes deal with that?
So I was not a downtown person, so that colors some of my perception. I also live in a very old house, and not old charming, even though I love my house. It's an old house, right? How we broadly didn't anticipate what the highest cost could be when we opened those walls or pulled up that floor is probably one of the bigger questions. It is downtown, though. We need to make sure that this gets done and it gets done properly. So, if everything's more expensive than it was before the pandemic, right? It just is. So some of those cost overruns are things that we could not have anticipated. maybe, but well, we'd have a school at Collie, but I also know people, and I want to say, even though I was not a downtown person, there are, I do believe there was some NIMBYism, but I also know people who I like and respect and who are my friends, whose rationale for the downtown had to do with their concerns around student absences and access and all those sorts of things. So we are here. So we need to do it. And if we need to take parties kind of to the woodshed, then we should. If people knew about this, then they should be held responsible. That said, renovating these old buildings, how could you not have anticipated that we would find things that we didn't anticipate, which sounds like an oxymoron, but we should have anticipated that there were things we weren't going to be able to anticipate. So, we can throw ourselves at the mercy of the state, but, the state isn't going to have a ton of money in the next couple of fiscal years either, right?
All right. We're chatting with Paulette Renault-Caragianes, candidate for Lowell City Council in District 2. Given a few minutes, we'll give you the information where you can go find out more about her campaign, more about her candidacy. But since you're running in District 2, what's the main difference between you and the incumbent who is seeking re-election? And you, by the way, you supported Corey Robinson in 2021. I remember you were one of the people on that famous billboard that a lot of his supporters talked about. Now here you are, 4 years later, you're running against him. What's the difference between the two of you?
So it's 4 years later, right? We've gotten to see how neighborhood representation is starting to play itself out and mature. I didn't support Councilor Robinson with blinders on. I knew there would be things that we disagreed about, right? I felt that at that point in time, he was the candidate who could best usher in the era of neighborhood representation for Centralville. I think as time has gone on, there have been, some things that I haven't quite agreed with. I think that my style is probably one of the bigger areas of difference. When we talked a little bit about what my experiences were, I've led diverse work groups. I've been in diverse work groups. I've been I'm currently, I'm the outgoing chair of the Merrimack Valley Housing Partnership, but I've been on boards where things can get contentious. You can't take those things personally, and you can't make them personal. So I think that my experience in helping to create consensus and respectful disagreement, as well as my mix of public and private sector, and the fact that I, again, my sense that the role of the city council is to be responsible to and be responsible for the person you hire to carry out the policies that you pass. And, that's the budget, right? The budget's the biggest reflection of what the priorities and policies of the city are.
You mentioned earlier when you were talking about your board experience that the role of a board member, which some folks have equated a city council or a school committee to, is as a board, is to kind of oversee it, but not get into the day-to-day nitpicking. Safe to say you won't file as many motions as some councilors have, whether that's a good or bad thing.
Right. Yeah. I think that there are areas of interest we all bring to our jobs, right? There are some things that just take on a level of importance. Again, the public health nurse thing, right? There aren't a lot of motions out there associated with public health, so would I be, pounding the pavement on those things? But, if one hand, when you hire the city manager to carry things out, you don't want every week to be, is it going to be, am I going to be out of a job because I haven't done, what this person has said? I think that, helping to drive constituent services should be driven by the city workers, not, but, the councilors can push that forward, but let them do things, there's no need to, to point out the week to week what you view as transgressions, right? What you need to do is, be thoughtful, work collaboratively with the other counselors are the rest of the board members, right? So, what's this counselor's priority? How does that work, in line with sort of the vision that I would have, or how would that interact positively with the interests of District 2? So I think that's probably, those are probably the biggest differences, sort of the approach to being a counselor and representing District 2.
All right. Other than 𝐏𝐚𝐮𝐥𝐞𝐭𝐭𝐞, your husband who served on the council.
Yeah, he did. Yeah, he was the deciding vote that made Cross Point.
You mentioned that.
Yeah. No, well, so you never know what you're going to be called upon to do, right?
Sure.
You can say on this circumstance I'll do this, but there are some pivotal votes that'll come your way that you will never know what's going to come your way. So you always have to be ready and thoughtful.
Yes. How is there somebody that you would that you look at and you'd shape your style after? Is there a political idol you have?
I don't have a political idol per se. I think about leadership more than than politics. The people who have a willingness to kind of, and it's a skill. How do you hold your ground around something that you believe is really important, but also make yourself available to hear someone else's point of view? When I worked at Lowell Community Health Center, Dorcas Griggs-Saito was the executive director then, and her leadership style, it took a lot of people in the city a long time to appreciate that leadership style, right? That leadership style of, listening to people, but understanding that the buck stops with you. So I think that kind of a model is something that resonates with me.
All right. And if folks want to learn more about your candidacy, your campaign, we've got, as of right now, it looks like there'll be just two of you in the general election, but there is time to.
Looks like there was just one a little while ago, right?
That's right. So things can change quickly.
Yep.
How can folks find out more about you, about your campaign, besides the fact you'll be out probably knocking doors and going to community events?
Yep. So because, as you mentioned, we're still in our infancy, there isn't, we're still working on getting information out there. Even though I'm retired, I am a state employee. So, the fundraising bit is I have to have a hands-off relationship with that. And I'm still working that out. But, people can get in touch with me at my regular email address, rencar, RENCAR, @comcast.net until the time that I have everything out there. And I really look forward to the opportunity of talking to people and, listening to them and their concerns, and also I live in the neighborhood, right? I'm a taxpayer who lives in the neighborhood. I have a vision for what I want my neighborhood to be like, and I'd like for people to be able to react to that too.
All right. Paulette Renault-Caragianes, thank you so much for taking the time to join us here and giving the audience out there a chance to learn a little bit more about you. And I'm sure they'll have plenty of opportunities between now and September/November.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, thanks for your time. I really appreciate it. And, no matter what people do, getting people out to vote, Danielle McFadden has been, she's been sending, those, on her social media, that whole, are you interested in coming out to vote in November? We need people to feel like their vote really counts, and getting people out there is really important. So whatever people want to do in terms of how they use their vote, making sure they answer the city census so that they can vote, or sign someone's papers so that they're considered active. But, make sure people get out there and vote, no matter who they decide to vote for.
I have a hunch that between the work that you're going to do and the work that Councilor Robinson's going to do, I think the Centralville District 2 turnout's going to be a lot closer to 2021 than 2023 this time around.
Yeah, let's hope.
Thanks so much. Good luck. We'll catch you out there in the campaign trail.
It's a deal.
Thank you to Paulette. Thank you to you for tuning in as well. Hopefully you learned a little bit more and kind of now have an understanding of where the challenger sits in that field versus the incumbent. And we certainly hope to get him back here for a debate here in our Well Point studios at some point during the campaign as well. But of course, if you want to follow the election 2025 and learn more about the candidates, the issues, and everything happening in the city, as we like to say, inside Lowell. If Lowell is your home, this is your place. Everybody have a great weekend. Take care of yourselves, and we'll catch you on the other side.